So this week, I feel the Lord leading me a little bit to encourage you. And sometimes in life, when something bad happens, it's kind of natural for people to think, "Man, God is punishing me." And while that may be natural, it's not supernatural. When difficult things happen in our lives, it doesn't always mean that God is punishing us. And as a matter of fact, I think the Lord is often perfecting us in the difficulties that we face. And the way we are as people of faith, we always think that because of faith, and sometimes because of some false teaching that has impacted us that we don't realize, we think that people of faith, they don't have difficulties or struggles, and that's just simply not the case. As a matter of fact, we look at incredible passages in the Bible that are inspiring, and I'm reminded of Ephesians chapter 6, where Paul talks about the armor of God, and he talks about, therefore we don't struggle against flesh and blood, but against principalities. And then he starts talking about all this armor, the helmet of salvation, the breastplate of righteousness, and the sword of the Spirit, and all of these things. And we're like, yeah, I want some of that. But we often fail to really dive into the chapters that lead up to chapter 6. And chapters 4 and 5, there's some real weighty and meaty stuff that really talk about the struggle that leads up to utilizing all of those weapons that are designed to perfect us. And so, and by perfecting us, I don't mean that we become perfect people, but it's improving our character. We're becoming more like who Christ is. And so Paul uses this phrase in Ephesians chapter 4 after he's just unloaded all this stuff about spiritual wealth and spiritual blessings. Like, we're loaded with all this spiritual wealth. And I like to think of ourselves as followers of Jesus. We're spiritual billionaires. Everything has been deposited into our spiritual account to utilize. And it is in the midst of the problems and the difficulties that we spend those things. So we can't buy into the philosophy of living our lives like you don't get the promise without the problem. You don't get the strength without the struggle, and you don't get the victory without the vexation. It is all of those things that allow us to spend our spiritual wealth on this side of eternity in preparation for how we'll live forever and ever and ever. So in verse 1, Paul says, man, make every effort to live a life that is worthy of your calling. And so that worthy of your calling is the Greek word axios, and it means literally bringing up the other beam of the balance. And so there's a balance between all of our spiritual wealth and then how we practice that wealth. So there's a balance between our profession and our practice, and we're to make every effort to live a life that is worthy of the calling or the spiritual wealth that has been deposited into our lives as a result of Christ dying on the cross for us and us receiving that sacrifice, receiving that righteousness. And so what I would encourage you to do is to be reminded that when you're in the midst of the problems, that's when the promises mean something. When you're in the midst of the struggle, that's when the strength makes sense. When you're in the midst of the vexation, that's when the victory can be enjoyed when it comes. And so we can't always be thinking that we've done something wrong because we're going through difficult circumstances. The truth is that He's changing us into the people that He wants us to be, and He's allowing us to reflect His glory here on this side of eternity to a world that may not know Him. As they watch us, we're to represent Christ, and they are to see the glory of Christ being worked into our lives. This is why Paul uses terminology that sometimes confuses us. He says, work out your salvation. And so we're like, I thought I was saved by grace. Well, you are saved by grace. But once you're saved by grace, there is a working that grace into my life so that I'm dying to myself on a daily basis in order that Christ might live in me. So don't get discouraged or feel defeated by your problems and some of the circumstances that are going on around you. These are opportunities for the Lord to really refine you. And the more you go through the refiner's fire, like it is hot down in the refiner's fire, But the more you go through it, the more brilliant your life becomes, the more satisfied you are as an individual. So don't be down this week because things are difficult. Those difficulties are making you into the person that God wants you to be. So as you face the challenges in life, as you face those things that are causing you to feel weak, know that your strength is gaining and you are a spiritual billionaire. So take that wealth and spend it in a way that makes you a fruitful individual that the Lord can use on a daily basis to bring about His glory in this planet. I hope you have a great day, and I can't wait to share it with you next week.